Hey, Husker fans, we are back. It's the Three Keys after a bye week. Nebraska Northwestern this weekend. Both teams 3-3. Both teams probably didn't necessarily expect to be 3-3. For sure, Northwestern was not projected to be 3-3, but here we are. Going into the 100th anniversary of Memorial Stadium. That's pretty cool, right? That's going to be very neat. They're going to celebrate that a little bit on Saturday. We haven't talked about it much this week, but Nebraska will be wearing red jerseys with a blue outline around the numbers in commemoration of the very first game that was played at Memorial Stadium when Nebraska wore blue jerseys to contrast with Oklahoma. Well, on this Saturday, they'll be wearing red, and Northwestern will almost certainly be wearing its usual white. The Wildcats have had an interesting last 6 months. Obviously, their head coach, Pat Fitzgerald, was fired over the summer related to a hazing investigation. The interim head coach is David Braun, who used to be the defensive coordinator at North Dakota State. He is almost certainly not going to be the head coach here in 6 more months. So Northwestern is playing with house money. Every game they win on the way out is going to be gravy. I don't know how many of the players will be there after this year. This is very much a Northwestern 2023 kind of experience, and I don't think they're going to play with a heck of a lot to lose, folks. I think they're going to come in and they're going to try to win a football game, and they probably look at Nebraska's offense and say, maybe we got a shot. There's going to be some other games this year where they're like, I don't know, but this one, I think Nebraska has to know that Northwestern's going to come out and maybe throw that kitchen sink at them. This is one of those games where you have to be really mindful of the team you're playing and make sure that you don't let their hope grow into a bigger and bigger flame as the game goes on, because if that flame gets really big, fans will get nervous and they'll start thinking about that volleyball match later that night with Nebraska and Wisconsin. Okay, let's get to the first key, pound the rock. I don't know where the rock is anymore that Bill Callahan put the sign Pound the Rock on. It used to be when you came right out of the tunnel, the old tunnel, the second tunnel, not the first tunnel, but the second tunnel and not the third tunnel, which is the current tunnel now. And it was right there. It was a big rock, and the players would hit it, and it was pound the rock. And remember what Bill Callahan said, you're going to pound the rock, you're going to pound. So anyway, you pound the rock. And then they relocated the rock. And it felt like they relocated the rock maybe outside of Memorial Stadium. And then you didn't really pound it anymore. You just sort of saw it, and you'd have to go walk over in the rock garden. I don't know if that rock is there anymore, but they moved the rock back in 2008, I think. So anyway, the pound the rock thing was good, though. You want to pound the rock. You want to run the football. And Nebraska needs to be able to run the football against Northwestern, which allows 172 yards on the ground per game. That's worse than the Big Ten. That's a little misleading. A little bit, not too much. There's a couple games where they actually stopped the run pretty well against Rutgers and against Penn State. Now, Penn State blew out Northwestern, but Penn State's got a better throw game than Nebraska does, and they were able to kind of do that in the second half. But Nebraska's got to be able to run the football. They've got a dual threat quarterback in Heinrich Haarberg, or if Haarberg were to get banged up, Jeff Sims, who looks like he's 100%. And you can run that quarterback. Makes it hard for a defense if they've got to defend what they call a +1 run game, right? +1 is that quarterback that all of a sudden it's 11 on 11. It's no longer 10 on 11. And so Northwestern should have a hard time defending some of the things Nebraska wants to do. But Nebraska's got to be able to run the football. You got to run it right downhill. They went maybe at times get around that Northwestern defense. Would like to see Billy Kemp, maybe a couple of wide receivers get involved in that run game, maybe on a sweep or something of that order, or an option pitch, something. Northwestern is not a real fast team. Okay, so when you get Northwestern outside the numbers, you can get around them, right? If they've got guys out there who are open for tackles or whatever you want to call it, there's a one-on-one situation in space. I like Nebraska's chances. Northwestern's never been the most athletic team, but up the middle of the field, Northwestern is tough as hell. They usually have pretty good interior linemen who play hard. They got a really good linebacker in Blake Gallagher, and they usually have hard-hitting safeties. So up that hash marks, right? They're tough in there. So Nebraska's going to have to find a way to punch some holes in there, but also simultaneously get outside. Either way, they got to pound the rock. Bill Callahan style. I don't know where the rock is. Maybe we need to find it. Okay, rely on the Rooks. Now you're thinking to yourself, you're talking about the rookies, and I am, but this is a double Sam Tondra. Rooks are also what? On a chessboard, they are the flanks. They're on the outside, right? Got to find a way to get over the top once or twice in this game. It might be with the young guys, right? It might be with Malachi Coleman, who's a freshman. It might be with Jalen Lloyd, who's a freshman. It might be Alex Bullock. Might be Thomas Fedoni flexed out. You just got to find a way to stretch Northwestern horizontally, right? One of the things, Nebraska had a lot of success against Northwestern's defense over the years because Nebraska was a spread offense with Scott Frost. And what they do is they kind of spread them all the way out. And then Northwestern, when you get them in space, they're not quite as tough, right? They're not in that phone booth anymore. And Nebraska could manipulate and maneuver. That they didn't win a lot of games under Frost. They lost in 18, and they lost in 20, and they lost in 22. But Nebraska always had success moving the football. That's my point, is they'd spread them out, and then they'd kind of try to find where to go, and they'd usually have quite a bit of success. I think this time, Nebraska's got to figure out kind of the same thing. Okay, even though we don't necessarily love where our situation is with the receivers on the edge, we're going to have to get it out there to them anyway, whether that's on screens or that's going over the top once or twice. Look for Marcus Satterfield to take a few shots, especially if Northwestern chooses, hey, screw it, we're going to put 8 in the box, we're going to stop the run, we're going to dare you to throw this football on the perimeter. I think Nebraska will try to find some ways. I'm sure they've thought over the last 2 weeks how they're going to do that. And yeah, you see me talking a lot about offense, for sure. I think that's important in this game. This, to me, is a game where I think Nebraska's defense is going to hold up, and we'll get to them in a second. But Nebraska's offense needs to put some things on the board. Northwestern's defense is decent, but it's not elite. This is a kind of game where you can chalk up 375, 400 yards, get 24, 28 points, put that on the board, and say goodnight and go over to the volleyball match. Nebraska's got to play that way, though. They have to be on point offensively. They can't come out and be sleepy and sloppy for a half, and they've had some problems with that, as you may well know. Okay, now key number 3, turn it up. And whoever Northwestern plays at quarterback, I don't really know who it's going to be. I think it's probably not going to be Ben Bryant, but maybe. He's been banged up. The backup's Brendan Sullivan. He's kind of a runner, but again, he's not a guy that's going to get around the edge real easy. He's more of a physical runner, maybe between the numbers. And then they got Ryan Helinski on the bench, and he's a guy that beat Nebraska last year, and he can throw it. I mean, he can throw the football. They got another guy, Jack Lausch, who's kind of like a tight end, wildcat quarterback. So they're going to try to find ways to get Nebraska, leveraged and then pop a run. What they want to do is keep the chains moving and try to, they don't hit a lot of big plays, so they got to try to keep the chains moving and try to throw the football a little bit when they can. I think Nebraska's got to come after Northwestern. Put them on their heels early, play with a leading edge as I talk about it. There's some teams you want to be thoughtful on that. I think there are games where a team's good enough to kind of burn you with those kind of things, and you got to be thoughtful. I think Colorado at times was able to do that against Nebraska because of the quality of its receivers. But if Nebraska plays with a leading edge and they get Northwestern on their heels a little bit, I think you can feel good about a turnover or two, and I think you can feel good about Nebraska winning this football game. However, if it's a game where Nebraska's just kind of, I don't know, they're just kind of sleeping about, and it's 7-6 at halftime, and it's 13-9 after 3 quarters. This is a game where it can get tricky. Nebraska can't afford to be this sort of sloppy, sleepy self that it's been on offense at times, and it can't afford to get too complacent on defense. This is going to be a game where I don't think it would be the worst thing to play coverage at times and just bring 3 or 4, and you're probably going to get Northwestern off the field at times, especially if Brendan Sullivan's the quarterback. But you don't want to get too complacent. You don't want to get this game in a situation where, again, it's 13-9 in the 4th quarter, it's 16-10. It takes one wheel route against the linebacker, and boom, the game's changed. That's the thing Nebraska has to avoid. I think they've got to play with a leading edge, play like the more talented, aggressive team. They do that. They go into that 4th quarter with a 13 to 17 point lead, and I think you're going to feel pretty good about it. I think Nebraska wins this game, but I'm not sure it's going to be easy. There's a sense that Nebraska, after bye weeks, they've been so-so. They've been okay at times. Simultaneously, I think Rule's edge this week indicates he really wants them to turn it up and to play with the kind of, he said today that this is a game for the barometer of their soul, which is interesting. They're playing Northwestern, but I think what he's getting at is, are we going to play with the same kind of urgency that we played with against Illinois, or are we going to sort of tiptoe into the game and feel it out and again go 13-9 into the 4th quarter? That's not what Rule wants. He wants them to play with aggression and energy from the start to finish. If Nebraska does that, they'll win. I think this might be an interesting game, though. It won't surprise me if it's a 1-score game going into the 4th quarter, and it won't surprise me if Nebraska's up 14-17 because Northwestern can't get much done. I do think Nebraska wins, but by how much will be determined by their effort and their aggression early in the game. Okay, that is our 3 keys for Nebraska Northwestern. We'll be back next week to preview Nebraska Purdue.